Essentialism, the disciplined pursuit of less. Written by Greg McKeown. Summarized by Detailed Book Summaries. Don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 1. The Essentialist. You can do anything, but not everything. Let that linger in your mind for a moment. Because in a world that constantly screams for more work, more obligations, more yesies, this single truth lands like a splash of cold water. You can do anything, but not everything. We've all been there, waking up to a calendar that feels like a burden, a to-do list that looks like it belongs to someone else, a schedule packed so tight there's barely room to breathe, let alone think. And somewhere beneath the emails, the errands, the meetings that never seem to end, you wonder, what happened to me? You're not lazy. You're not unmotivated. You're simply exhausted, overextended, pulled in so many directions that your own priorities, your joy, your clarity, your energy have taken a back seat. Maybe you've even forgotten what your priorities are. This, Greg McKeown tells us, is the life of a non-essentialist, a person caught in the trap of saying yes when they want to say no, doing everything for everyone except themselves, and mistaking busyness for value. It's the kind of life that looks full on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. But what if there's another way? What if there's a path that doesn't involve constant motion, but deliberate movement? A life not cluttered with the trivial many, but focused on the vital few. That's where the essentialist comes in. The person who has learned the art of doing less, but better. Not just to optimize productivity, but to reclaim control. To live a life that is designed, not dictated. The essentialist doesn't rush. They pause. They think. They discern. They say no not to be difficult, but because they know that every yes carries a cost. And that cost is time, energy, clarity, peace. This first chapter isn't about strategy. It's about mindset. McKeown draws a sharp contrast between these two archetypes, the essentialist and the non-essentialist. One is reactive. The other is intentional. One believes everything is important. The other knows almost nothing is. The non-essentialist says, I have to. The essentialist says, I choose to. The non-essentialist asks, how can I fit it all in? The essentialist asks, what's the trade-off? And is it worth it? The non-essentialist is pulled in many directions. The essentialist goes boldly in one. Let's pause here, because this isn't just about time management. It's about identity, about the lens through which you see the world. And that lens shapes everything, from the decisions you make to the peace you feel when you lay your head down at night. Why do so many of us live like non-essentialists? The answer is both simple and sobering: conditioning. From a young age, we're taught to please, to perform, to prove. In school, we're rewarded for doing everything the teacher asks, not for questioning whether the assignment matters. The workplace, the most valuable employee is the one who never says no, who stays late, who's always available. And in our personal lives, we often say yes to avoid conflict, guilt, or disappointment, even when it costs us our energy, our time, and our peace of mind. It's not our fault, but it is our responsibility. And that's where McKeown invites us to wake up. Because here's the truth: if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. The essentialist understands this. They don't see trade-offs as a burden, they see them as a tool. Every time they say no, they're not not shutting a door, they're opening one. A door to clarity, to focus, to something that actually matters. But let's be real, choosing to live this way takes courage. It requires swimming against the current of modern culture, a culture that worships hustle and glorifies being busy. But hustle without direction is just motion without meaning. So, what's the first step to reclaiming your life? It's not action, it's awareness. You start by noticing. Noticing how many of your decisions come from obligation instead of intention. Noticing how often you say yes when your soul is screaming no. Noticing the cost of your compliance, the stress, the burnout, the erosion of your inner peace. McKeown isn't scolding you. He's inviting you to ask some uncomfortable, yet liberating questions. What have I said yes to that I regret? What have I committed to that isn't aligned with who I really am? What would it look like to stop trying to do it all and start doing only what matters? These are not small questions. They are foundational. Because before you can build a life of purpose, you have to first clear the clutter. And the first thing to clear, the belief that you have to do it all. You don't. You can say no. You can choose differently. You can begin again. This chapter is that beginning. It doesn't ask you to change your calendar. It asks you to change your lens. To realize that life isn't about being more efficient with the trivial. It's about being ruthless with the essential. So what does an essentialist do? They pause when others panic. They listen when others react. They cut when others cling. They make space, mental, emotional, and physical, for what truly matters. They protect their attention like gold because they know it is. And here's the magic. When you start to live like this, the quality of your days changes. The fog lifts. The noise quiets. You begin to breathe again, not just with your lungs, but with your soul. You stop living out of habit and start living by design. So, if there's one thing this first chapter wants to leave you with, it's this. You have a choice. You always have. And it's never too late to choose less, but better. Chapter 2. Choose the invincible power of choice. What if I told you that the most powerful tool you possess isn't your intelligence, your job title, or your resume, but your ability to choose? Not everyone believes that. In fact, many of us walk through life thinking we don't have much of a choice at all. We say things like, I had to do it, or I didn't really have an option, or that's just how it is. But what if those phrases weren't reflections of reality, just habits of thinking? Greg McKeown begins this chapter with a powerful assertion. We always have a choice, even when the options seem limited or unpleasant, even when the consequences of choosing differently might feel risky or uncomfortable. The ability to choose, really choose, is something we're all born with, but along the way, we forget. Or worse, we surrender it. And that surrender has consequences. Because when we stop choosing, we start reacting. We live on autopilot. We comply. We let other people fill our calendars, our inboxes, and even our minds. We become passengers in a life that we never actually chose. But deep down, you probably already know that. You felt it. That moment when you agreed to something your heart wasn't in. That time you felt stuck in a routine you never intended to build. That season when life was happening to you, not with you. This chapter is an invitation to change that. to take back what's always been yours, the power to choose. Now, McKeown is careful not to pretend that choices are always easy. They're not. Sometimes every option has a cost. Sometimes saying no creates tension, awkwardness, even conflict. But that doesn't mean you don't have a choice. It just means that the choice requires courage. And courage, like anything, gets easier with practice. So much of this chapter revolves around one core truth, the idea that choice is not just a moment, it's a mindset. The essentialist mindset isn't about controlling everything. It's about recognizing that you can control what matters. It's about replacing "I have to" with "I choose to." Because those three words shift everything. Think about it. I have to go to this meeting. Now change it to "I choose to go to this meeting." What does that feel like? It may still be a meeting you don't enjoy, but now you're aware it's a choice. Maybe you're choosing it because you value the relationship, or the role, or the responsibility. Or maybe, in hearing yourself say it, you realize you don't actually want to go. And that realization opens the door to something powerful, discernment. It's in that space between automatic obligation and conscious intention that essentialism begins to take root. The trap most of us fall into is not in making bad choices, but in forgetting that we're making choices at all. That's what McKeown calls learned helplessness, the idea that over time, when people feel like their actions don't make a difference, they stop trying. They stop choosing. And eventually, they forget they ever had power in the first place. You've probably seen this in someone, maybe even in yourself. Someone who stays in a draining job or a broken relationship or a toxic habit, not because they want to, but because the cost of choosing differently feels too high. And when that belief becomes fixed, it becomes dangerous. Because life doesn't just fill with noise, it fills with resignation. But what if you interrupted that belief? What if, just for a moment, you question the script? That's what this chapter urges us to do. It urges us to wake up, to remember that even when the road is narrow, even when the options are imperfect, we still have the power to choose our response. And from that place of ownership, we can begin to build something new. Not all at once, not dramatically, but choice by choice. It starts small, choosing to pause before replying to a message, choosing to decline a meeting that doesn't serve your goals, choosing to spend the evening resting instead of catching up, choosing not to explain yourself every time you say no. Each of these acts may seem insignificant, but they compound. And what they build is identity, an identity rooted in intention, not reaction. What's stunning is how quickly life begins to change when you start choosing again. There's a lightness that comes with clarity, a sense of freedom that comes from letting go of the illusion that you're trapped. This chapter reminds us that choice isn't just about what we do, it's about who we are. It's about shifting from the role of a passive participant to that of a deliberate architect. Someone who builds their life not from what's expected, but from what's essential. Of course, there will always be pressure. There will always be people who expect more than you can give. But here's what the essentialist knows. The price of trying to please everyone is the loss of your own direction. And no matter how much you give, if it's not aligned with what truly matters to you, it will never feel like enough. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, cornered, or stuck, pause. Ask yourself, what am I choosing right now? And is this the choice I want to be making? Not choosing is still a choice. But now, you know better. You know that freedom isn't found in doing it all. It's found in choosing what matters most. And once you choose, really choose, you'll begin to feel something you may not have felt in a long time, peace. Not because life got easier, but because it finally became yours. Chapter 3. Discern the unimportance of practically everything. There's a moment that hits all of us at some point, when the weight of too many options becomes suffocating. Your inbox is overflowing. Your to-do list keeps growing. Invitations, responsibilities, possibilities, all demanding your time, your attention, your energy. And even though you're moving fast, grinding hard, showing up everywhere, you still feel like you're falling behind, drifting further from clarity, not closer. Why? Because the world isn't suffering from a lack of opportunity. It's drowning in it. And here in Chapter 3, Greg McKeown lays down a brutal truth. Almost everything is noise. Most of what comes at us each day, emails, pings, social invites, extra tasks, new trends, ambitious goals, is non-essential. Not bad, not evil, not toxic, just unnecessary. It doesn't move the needle. It doesn't serve your purpose. It doesn't align with the person you're trying to become. But if we don't stop to discern, we treat it all as equal. And when everything matters the same, nothing really matters at all. This chapter isn't about prioritization. It's about perspective. McKeown wants us to see the world differently, to realize that the vital few things that truly matter are buried beneath an avalanche of the trivial many. And unless we train ourselves to tell the difference, we'll spend our lives chasing distractions, confusing movement with meaning. Let's pause here. Ask yourself this: am I investing my energy in the things that matter most? Or am I just reacting to whatever shows up? That's a hard question, but it's also the doorway to freedom. Because essentialism begins when we learn not just to choose, but to discern. And discernment is a skill, a muscle, one that gets sharper with practice. It starts with asking, is this important or just loud? Most people treat all incoming information as equal, but the essentialist understands something deeper. Not all efforts yield the same results. Not all inputs have equal impact. In fact, most of the rewards in life come from a small percentage of the effort. This isn't just a theory. It's backed by what's known as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. 20% of customers drive 80% of revenue. 20% of your wardrobe gets worn 80% of the time. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You realize that success, happiness, fulfillment, they don't come from doing everything. They come from doing the right things. But here's the catch. The right things are rarely the loudest things. The right things don't always shout for your attention. They require space, stillness, reflection. And that's where the essentialist excels, because they make room to listen, not just to the world, but to themselves. McKeown tells a story here, a simple, relatable one, about working with a company that was struggling. They had talented people, solid ideas, and a ton of activity. but progress was slow. They were busy, but not effective. So he asked them, which of these projects is the most important? The room went quiet, because the truth was they didn't know. They'd been treating every task, every idea, every email as if it all mattered equally. But in doing so, they diluted their effort. They lost sight of what was truly essential. They hadn't failed from a lack of hard work. They failed from a lack of discernment. And how many of us can relate to that? We fill our days with checklists and hustle thinking productivity is the goal. But productivity without clarity is just a hamster wheel. It wears you out, but gets you nowhere. The essentialist steps off the wheel. They slow down not to be lazy, but to be precise. They scan the landscape and ask the hard, quiet questions. What's truly important here? Where is the highest point of contribution? What can I eliminate? And here's the paradox. The more you eliminate the non-essential, the more effective you become. The more you do less, the more impact you make. Because focus isn't about saying yes to more. It's about saying no to almost everything. So what does discernment look like in real life? It might look like canceling a meeting that doesn't serve a goal. It might look like pausing before committing to a project. It might look like letting go of a habit, a tradition, even a relationship that no longer aligns with your values. And yes, that can be uncomfortable. But clarity always requires courage. In this chapter, McKeown doesn't give us a formula. He gives us something better, a filter. A way of seeing that sharpens our judgment and protects our energy. And the more you practice using that filter, the more powerful it becomes. You start to feel the difference between urgent and important, between motion and progress, between what pulls your attention and what deserves it. And here's the real magic. Once you start to live this way, you begin to trust yourself again. You stop chasing and start choosing. You stop surviving your days and start shaping them. You stop asking, how can I fit everything in? And start asking, what's worth fitting in at all? And suddenly, life begins to breathe again. It becomes lighter, simpler, sharper. Because now you're not just moving, you're moving with meaning. So as this chapter closes, McKeown leaves us with a quiet challenge to practice discernment. Every day, in every decision, to become more selective, not just about what you say yes to, but about what you allow to shape your life. It's not about doing less for the sake of minimalism. It's about doing less so that what remains has room to thrive. Because when almost everything is noise, the rare and precious few things that truly matter deserve your full, undivided attention. And that's the heart of discernment. Chapter 4. Trade-off. Which problem do I want? You can't have it all. It's not the most popular truth, but it is one of the most freeing. Because once you accept that reality, a new question emerges, one that's far more empowering, far more honest, and far more useful than the one you've probably been asking your whole life. It's not, how can I do everything? It's, which problem do I want? This chapter is about trade-offs. Not the kind we try to avoid, but the kind we must learn to embrace. Here, what most of us do, we try to dodge trade-offs entirely. We say yes to everything and convince ourselves we can somehow juggle it all. We tell ourselves we'll figure it out later, we'll stay up late, we'll multitask. We chase the illusion of balance, believing that if we just work a little harder or become more efficient, we won't have to sacrifice anything. But trade-offs aren't the enemy. They're not some cruel flaw in the system. They're the system itself. Greg McKeown invites us here to stop resisting and start choosing. Because whether you want to admit it or not, you are already making trade-offs. Every yes is a no to something else. Every commitment is a withdrawal from your time bank. Every priority carries a cost. The difference between the essentialist and the non-essentialist is simple. The essentialist makes trade-offs deliberately, while the non-essentialist makes them by default. Let's sit with that for a moment, because it's easy to nod and say, sure, trade-offs are real. But it's much harder to actually live that truth. To say no to an opportunity you might enjoy because it's not the right opportunity. To disappoint someone you care about because preserving your energy matters more in that moment. To leave money on the table because time with your family is worth more. These aren't easy decisions, but they are necessary ones. And when you learn to make them consciously, everything changes. Think of your life like a garden. You can try to plant every seed, water everything, hope for the best, but what will actually happen? Overcrowding, weak roots, choked growth. The essentialist doesn't try to grow everything. They choose. They prepare the soil. They prune ruthlessly, not because they hate plants, but because they love the few they've chosen. And that love requires focus. So, how do we begin making better trade-offs? McKeown's starts by challenging the myth of having it all. We're raised in a culture that feeds us this idea that if we just try hard enough, want it badly enough, or manage our time cleverly enough, we can do everything. But it's a lie, a seductive, soul-depleting lie. And what's worse is that believing it keeps us stuck in a state of chronic guilt. Because if we should be able to have it all, then every time we fall short, every missed opportunity, every forgotten commitment, every late night feels like a personal failure. But once you let go of the idea of everything, something powerful opens up: clarity. Clarity about what really matters. Clarity about what you're willing to give up in order to protect what you truly value. Clarity that lets you choose your trade-offs, not fear them. McKeown shares a moment from his own life that perfectly illustrates this. He was invited to a meeting with a client, one of the biggest opportunities of his career. But the meeting was scheduled just after the birth of his child. His colleagues assumed he'd go. After all, it was essential, right? But Greg paused, he reflected, and he made a conscious trade-off. He stayed home. He held his newborn daughter. He was present. Did he lose something professionally? Maybe. But what he gained was alignment. He honored his values. He lived out what mattered most. And isn't that what essentialism is all about? Choosing the things that matter, even when it costs you something that doesn't. Making peace with the fact that you can't do it all, and finding joy in doing the few things that actually count. This chapter also reminds us that not all problems are created equal. You're going to experience stress, pressure, discomfort, no matter what. The question is, which problems are you willing to carry? The non-essentialist spreads themselves thin, taking on every task to avoid conflict, guilt, or fear. But in doing so, they invite deeper problems, burnout, resentment, regret. The essentialist, on the other hand, chooses their problems wisely. They might say no and disappoint someone short-term, but they avoid betraying themselves long-term. It's a subtle but crucial shift, from avoidance to agency. And agency is what this chapter is really about. The moment you stop trying to avoid trade-offs and start choosing them, you reclaim your power. You stop drifting and start steering. You stop reacting and start directing. You begin to design your life. So the next time you're faced with a tough decision, don't ask, how can I make everyone happy? Ask instead, what am I willing to give up in order to protect what matters most? Ask, which problem do I want? Because that's the real secret of essentialism. It's not about escaping hard choices. It's about making better ones. With your eyes open, with your heart clear, with your values intact. And in a world full of noise, urgency, and endless options, that kind of clarity is rare. It's also revolutionary. Chapter 5. Escape the perks of being unavailable. When was the last time you were truly unavailable? Not I'm in a meeting unavailable. Not I'll reply to this later unavailable. Not I'm technically off, but still checking my phone unavailable. I mean off the grid, unreachable. No notifications, no dings, no mental clutter. Just you, your thoughts, your breath, your inner voice. If that question makes you pause or laugh nervously, you're not alone. We live in a world that worships availability. Being reachable is a virtue. Responding instantly earns you praise. Being always on is treated like a badge of honor. But in Chapter 5, McKeown introduces a countercultural, quietly radical idea. You can't access clarity if you're constantly connected. To explore what's essential, to think deeply, to discern with wisdom, you must escape. Escape isn't about running away. It's about breaking free from distraction, from overload, from the noise that drowns your ability to listen to what actually matters. This chapter is your invitation to retreat, not permanently, but deliberately. To pull back from the frantic buzz of the world, even just for an hour, so you can actually hear yourself think. Because here's the truth, deep thinking requires space. And that kind of space doesn't happen by accident. It has to be carved out, intentionally, fiercely, sometimes even awkwardly. McKeown shares a story of a highly successful executive who made it a rule to take 2 hours every day just to think. No phone, no meetings, no emails, just uninterrupted contemplative time. Most people thought he was eccentric, maybe even lazy, but he was the opposite. He was clear, sharp, strategic, and light years ahead of his peers. Why? Because while others were stuck reacting to the latest email or chasing down every shiny distraction, he was zooming out, seeing patterns, planning from clarity, not chaos. And as a result, he wasn't just productive, he was essentially productive. Here's the thing we often forget. Being busy is not the same as being valuable. Just because you're hustling doesn't mean you're moving in the right direction. Just because you're responding quickly doesn't mean your decisions are wise. In fact, sometimes our most urgent replies come from our least considered thoughts. Essentialists understand this. They build time to think, not when everything quiets down, but as a non-negotiable priority. McKeown talks about Bill Gates' famous Think Weeks, where he goes into total seclusion, books, papers, a notebook, and just reflects. No press, no speeches, no meetings, just uninterrupted mental space. Now you might think, well, sure, he can do that. He's Bill Gates. But the point isn't about money or power. It's about boundaries. And boundaries aren't reserved for billionaires. They're available to all of us if we're brave enough to draw them. So what does escape look like in your world? It doesn't have to mean a cabin in the woods, though that sounds lovely, doesn't it? It can mean a walk with no phone, a morning blocked off for deep work, a quiet corner at a coffee shop with a journal, an hour on airplane mode, a weekend with no obligations. Escape is about disconnecting from the noise so you can reconnect to what's essential. It's also about resisting the temptation to fill every gap. We treat boredom like a disease. The moment there's silence, we grab our phones. The second there's a lull, we open another tab. But boredom isn't the enemy, it's the entryway to insight. Because it's in that space, when your mind is free to wander, that your truest ideas emerge. That's when you start noticing things you've been too busy to see. That's when your subconscious starts connecting dots, processing pain, birthing clarity. In one moment of escape, you might realize that you've been chasing the wrong goal, or that you've outgrown a habit, or that the opportunity you were about to take isn't aligned with your values at all. Those insights don't come from constant busyness. They come from space. So here's the practical takeaway from Chapter 5. Build escape into your rhythm. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for burnout to force you offline. Make it a part of your system. You could start small, 30 minutes each morning with no devices. 1 meeting-free afternoon per week. A daily walk with no agenda. A weekend retreat once a quarter. Or even just a single hour right now where you step away and ask yourself, what am I doing that really matters? And don't apologize for it. You're not being lazy. You're being essential. You're stepping out of the noise to tune into something far more important, your own inner wisdom. And in a world addicted to speed, there's something incredibly powerful about choosing stillness. So go ahead, escape. Be unreachable for a while. Let the silence speak. You'll be amazed at what you hear. Chapter 6. Look, see what really matters. There's something strangely powerful about learning to really see. Not just glance, not just skim, not just scroll or skim across the surface of life, but to see clearly, deeply, with intention. To observe the world not through urgency and overwhelm, but with calm focus. Because often, the difference between someone who lives reactively and someone who lives intentionally isn't intelligence or effort. It's this simple ability to notice what actually matters. In Chapter 6, Greg McKeown brings us face to face with a core discipline of the Essentialist, the art of seeing clearly. And it starts with a deceptively small question. What are you really paying attention to? It's easy to assume we're tuned in. We read the headlines. We catch the emails. We respond to messages with lightning speed. But being surrounded by information isn't the same as seeing what's important. We've become masters of scanning, but amateurs at observing. This chapter encourages us to slow down, to stop reacting, and start looking deliberately. Because only then can we spot the clues patterns, and insights that point us toward the vital few instead of the trivial many. McKeown shares the story of an executive who was preparing to take on a significant role. Instead of rushing into action, she spent 90 days just observing, watching how people worked, what slowed them down, which decisions were most costly, and what the organization really needed. Most would have rushed in with plans and speeches, but her decision to look first made her incredibly effective. Because by the time she moved, she was moving with clarity. There's a reason surgeons take time to study scans before a procedure, or that world-class investors read markets more than they trade them, or that great leaders listen more than they speak. Observation is leverage. And yet, so few of us make time for it. We rush into action, overcommitted, scattered, mistaking motion for meaning. We confuse doing something with doing the right thing. But what if we paused? What if we really looked beneath the noise, beyond the to-do list, past the surface tension? McKeown suggests that essentialists learn to notice the lead domino, the small action that tips everything else into motion. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's buried under busy work or hidden behind drama. But if you train yourself to see it, you can stop spending your energy putting out fires and start preventing them altogether. Here's a simple way to begin. Start asking yourself regularly, right arrow, what is the one thing that, if done well, will make everything else easier or irrelevant? This question forces clarity. It strips away the clutter. It tunes your vision. It's also a reminder that seeing what matters is not just about business or productivity. It's deeply human. Think of your relationships, your health, your inner world. We often ignore red flags because we're too busy. We miss emotional cues because we're rushing through conversations. We gloss over tension because we're afraid to slow down and feel. But an essentialist pauses and looks again. They don't just notice what's obvious, they look for what's essential. They ask, what's underneath this repeated frustration? What's the need behind this conflict? What's the opportunity hidden inside this disappointment? And sometimes, what they see changes everything. This chapter also teaches us the value of listening, not just to others, but to ourselves, to that quiet inner voice that often gets drowned out by deadlines and expectations. There's a scene McKeown recalls about a leader who kept a journal of observations, not feelings or narratives, just quick notes about things he noticed, behavior patterns, decisions that backfired, ideas that sparked something new. Over time, this simple discipline helped him see trends others missed. That's the power of looking. It gives you data. It gives you perspective. It gives you wisdom. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to become a monk or a philosopher to practice this. You just have to start noticing more and reacting less. Take walks and observe without a podcast blaring. Journal at the end of the day, not just what you did, but what you noticed. Ask yourself during meetings, what's not being said here? Before making a decision, pause and ask, what truly matters here? That pause, that moment of reflection. It's not a delay. It's a discipline. And over time, that discipline becomes a superpower. Because while the rest of the world is spinning in urgency, you're spotting what actually matters and moving with clarity and purpose. In a noisy, distracted world, simply being someone who can see clearly is rare. But it's also essential. Chapter 7. Play, embrace the wisdom of your inner child. You probably don't think of play as productive. You're not alone. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that play is something you grow out of, something reserved for recess and childhood, something frivolous, like a reward for hard work, rather than a force that fuels it. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if play isn't a luxury? What if it's actually a necessity? In Chapter 7, McKeown gently peels back the layers of this myth and reveals a truth most of us have forgotten. Play is essential, not optional, not immature, essential. And it's not just about fun, though fun is part of it. Play, in the Essentialist's world, is about curiosity. It's about freedom. It's about restoring creativity, lowering stress, and tapping into parts of ourselves that have long been buried under duty and deadlines. Think about it. When was the last time you did something just for the joy of it? Not to win, not to impress, not to check a box, just for the sheer experience. Children are masters at this. They don't need a reason to build castles in the sand or turn a cardboard box into a spaceship. Their minds are alive with possibility, unburdened by shoulds and to-do lists. But somewhere along the line, we traded in wonder for workaholism. And the result? We lost access to one of the most powerful sources of insight and renewal available to us. McKeown shares research that backs this up. Studies show that play doesn't just make us happier, it makes us smarter, more adaptable, more resilient. People who engage in regular play, whether it's through games, hobbies, tinkering, or creative expression, are better at problem solving and less prone to burnout. Why? Because play allows our minds to relax and expand. It opens mental doors that stress keeps shut. Ever notice how your best ideas often come when you're in the shower, or walking the dog, or doodling? That's no accident. When your brain gets a break from pressure, it gets better at connecting ideas in new ways. Play does that. It rewires the brain. McKeown tells the story of a brilliant designer who made it a point to go outside and play with new ideas, literally. She'd experiment with colors, materials, motion without any attachment to outcome. She wasn't trying to produce. She was just exploring. And ironically, this play, this unstructured, unforced activity, led her to breakthroughs that focused work never could. That's the paradox. When you give yourself permission to play, your capacity for essential work expands. And this isn't just about creative fields. Engineers, doctors, CEOs, people in every discipline benefit from play. Because play restores what pressure depletes. It renews your sense of curiosity, your sense of joy, your sense of possibility. So why do we resist it? Because our culture is obsessed with output, with results, with being busy as a proxy for being valuable. Play doesn't always produce something tangible, so we devalue it. But essentialists know better. They know that just because something isn't quantifiable doesn't mean it isn't essential. A walk through the park, a silly dance in your living room, sketching just for fun, playing catch, laughing at a ridiculous meme, building something with Legos. These aren't childish distractions. They are adult survival skills. McKeown draws on the wisdom of the child's mindset, unguarded, curious, fully present. And he challenges us to bring more of that into our lives, not as a regression, but as a kind of remembering. Because buried underneath all our productivity is a person who still longs to explore, imagine, create, play. The chapter closes with a powerful idea. Play is not the opposite of productivity. It's what makes productivity sustainable. So if you're feeling stuck, burned out, foggy, or disconnected, it may not be because you need more coffee, more hours, or more discipline. Maybe what you really need is more play. Here are a few simple, powerful ways to invite it back in. Set aside 20 minutes a day for a hobby with no outcome. Say yes to something just because it makes you laugh. Get outside and move without a fitness tracker. Make something badly on purpose. Let your curiosity lead you, not your calendar. And most of all, stop apologizing for enjoying yourself, because joy isn't a distraction. It's a compass. And when you follow it, you often find your way back to what truly matters. Chapter 8, Sleep, Protect the Asset. Imagine this. You're driving a luxury car, sleek, powerful, built for performance. You've got somewhere important to be. But there's one catch. The engine's running on fumes. The dashboard is blinking red, warning you to pull over. But instead of stopping, you press harder on the gas. Hopping momentum will carry you through. Sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly how most of us treat ourselves. We push through the exhaustion. We treat rest like a weakness. We wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor. And we pretend that just a few more hours of hustle will fix everything. It won't. In Chapter 8, Greg McKeown delivers one of the book's most urgent truths. You are your most valuable asset. Not your job, not your output, you. And if you don't protect the asset, your body, your energy, your mind, everything else crumbles. Let's be honest. In a culture addicted to achievement, sleep is one of the first sacrifices we make. We cut corners at night to get ahead in the morning. We pull late-nighters to meet deadlines. We glorify the grind and shame the nap. But McKeown makes a compelling, science-backed case. Sleep is not a luxury. It's a performance enhancer. Think about the most elite athletes in the world: Serena Williams, LeBron James, Roger Federer. Do you think they treat sleep like an afterthought? Not a chance. Many of them schedule 10+ hours a night because they know that peak performance isn't possible without deep recovery. If sleep is non-negotiable for the best in the world, why do we think we can function without it? Here's the truth most of us don't want to hear. When you're sleep deprived, you're not a hero, you're a liability. Your decision-making suffers. Your creativity dips. Your patience shortens. Your ability to focus, practically gone. You might feel productive. You might even be crossing things off your list. But chances are, you're working harder while delivering less. In one study McKeown cites, researchers found that sleep-deprived individuals performed cognitive tasks as poorly as if they were drunk. That's not a poetic exaggeration. It's a medical reality. And the worst part, the less sleep we get, the worse we become at noticing how impaired we are. We stumble through our days on autopilot, numbed by caffeine, propped up by adrenaline, missing opportunities, not because we're unmotivated, but because we're exhausted. So here's the Essentialist's alternative. Rest is not the enemy of results. Rest is what makes results sustainable. McKeown recounts the story of a highly successful executive who found herself on the verge of burnout. She was working 18-hour days, neglecting her health, constantly overwhelmed. And despite all the effort, she felt stuck, like her results were plateauing. Then she made a radical shift. She prioritized sleep. She treated it like a sacred appointment, non-negotiable. And within weeks, she noticed something strange. Her energy returned. Her focus sharpened. Her creativity bloomed. Her results soared. She wasn't doing more. She was doing less, better. This is the secret essentialists understand. When you protect the asset, everything else flows. It's not about being lazy. It's about being strategic. It's not about slowing down for the sake of it. It's about preserving your ability to go fast when it counts. So let's get practical. If you want to begin honoring sleep as essential, here are a few starting points. Establish a wind-down ritual. No screens, dim lights, a book, some music, a moment of gratitude. Your body needs to know it's time to switch off. Schedule sleep like you would a meeting. Block 7-9 hours. Protect that time. You wouldn't bail on your boss. Don't bail on your brain. Design your environment for rest. Cool room, blackout curtains, no glowing notifications. Signal to your nervous system. It's safe to relax. Let go of guilt. You are not wasting time by sleeping. You are investing in your clarity, your energy, your life. Because here's the thing, when you're rested, you see better, you think better, you decide better. And essentialism is, at its heart, about making better decisions, not more of them. So take a deep breath. Close your laptop. Stop scrolling. Pull over at the rest stop instead of pushing through another hour on an empty tank. You are the asset, and the asset deserves to be protected. Chapter 9. Select the power of extreme criteria. Imagine this. You're cleaning out your closet. You pull out a shirt and ask yourself, could I wear this again someday? You shrug and keep it. A few minutes later, you do the same with a pair of shoes. They're not perfect, but maybe they'll work for some occasion. Into the keep pile they go. Before long, you've decluttered and somehow ended up with almost everything still in your closet. Sound familiar? Now imagine you took a different approach. Instead of asking, could I, you asked, do I absolutely love this? Would I wear it right now? Suddenly, the criteria gets sharper, bolder, cleaner. You start saying no to anything that isn't a clear and passionate yes. This is the heart of Chapter 9, and one of the core principles of essentialism. If it isn't a clear yes, then it's a no. Greg McKeown calls this the power of extreme criteria. Because when your standards are vague or half-hearted, you end up saying yes to too much, and most of it, in truth, doesn't really matter. The world doesn't just ask for your attention. It demands it with urgency, with persuasion, and often with guilt. So if you don't have a crystal clear decision framework, you default to the easy yes, just to avoid conflict, just to keep moving. But the essentialist doesn't live by default. The essentialist chooses deliberately. And to do that, you need a filter strong enough to block out the noise and sharp enough to illuminate what truly belongs. Let's bring this idea to life. McKeown tells the story of an entrepreneur who was offered a potentially lucrative consulting opportunity. On paper, it looked great. Big name client, solid paycheck, lots of visibility. But when he paused to consider it, using his extreme criteria, he realized something important. The work didn't light him up. It didn't align with the kind of impact he most wanted to make. It was a pretty good opportunity, but not a hell yes. He walked away. And that one decision, that no, opened the door to a wildly better opportunity just a few weeks later. One that was aligned, energizing, and deeply meaningful. That's the power of discernment. It's not about judging everything harshly. It's about loving your time and energy enough to give them only to what matters most. But here's the catch. In order to say no more clearly, you have to define your yes more precisely. McKeown suggests asking questions like, does this opportunity align with what I truly want in the next 5 years? Would I feel thrilled to say yes to this, not just obligated? Does this request help me build the life I deeply want, or just distract me from it? It sounds intense. And it is. That's the point. Because vague criteria lead to vague results. And if you want to protect what's essential, you have to be ruthless with the non-essential. The yes or no decision isn't just a business skill. It's a life skill. Think about the projects you take on, the events you attend, the people you give your energy to, even the thoughts you allow to take up space in your mind. Without extreme clarity, we end up carrying everything. And in trying to carry everything, we carry nothing well. Let's pause here and really breathe this in. Because this isn't just about choices. It's about courage. It takes courage to say no when something looks good on the surface. It takes courage to hold out for the hell yes when the world tells you to settle. It takes courage to trust that fewer things done with passion will beat more things done with pressure. And yes, you will disappoint people. Yes, you will walk away from good things. Yes, you will miss out on certain opportunities. But what you gain in return is focus, energy, purpose, and peace. McKeown encourages us to try this in practice. The next time you're faced with a decision, big or small, try rating it on a scale from 1 to 100. If it doesn't score at least 90, treat it like a 0. Harsh, maybe. Effective, absolutely. Because your life isn't an open field to be filled with everyone else's requests. It's a garden, and you only have so much space to grow what matters. So try it. Pause before you say yes. Ask the hard questions. Don't settle for maybe. Don't dilute your impact by saying yes to everything. Protect your yes. Defend your no. And watch how clarity begins to shape everything. Chapter 10. Clarify one decision that makes 1,000. Let's start with a moment of quiet. Imagine standing at the center of a giant maze, walls rising on all sides, dozens of paths stretching out in every direction. Each turn represents a decision. Every fork, a possible future. And the longer you stand there, the more pressure you feel to make the right move. Overwhelming, isn't it? Now picture something different. A compass is handed to you. Not a detailed map, not a list of steps. Just a single, steady arrow pointing true north. Suddenly, everything feels different. The maze is still there, but you're no longer lost in it. You have a guiding force. This is the power of clarity. And in Chapter 10, Greg McKeown shows us why one decision made consciously and deliberately can remove the burden of thousands. He calls it your essential intent. Not a goal, not a vague aspiration, but a strategic, unambiguous, and inspiring declaration of what you're committing to and why. Let's break it down. Most of us live in reaction mode. We say yes to what's urgent, juggle whatever comes our way, try to please the loudest voice in the room. We set goals, sure, but they're often broad, safe, and hard to measure. Be more productive. Grow the business. Spend more time with family. Noble ideas, but they don't direct our energy. They don't create clarity. They leave room for interpretation and therefore distraction. Essentialists don't settle for vague intentions. They get specific. They articulate what they are pursuing and what they are not in one bold sentence. McKeown gives the example of a leadership team he worked with at a successful design firm. For years, they'd struggled to define their direction. There were too many competing priorities, too many good ideas on the table. Their strategy was a fog. So McKeown challenged them to define one essential intent, not a list of values, not a mission statement, just one sentence that answered, what is the most important contribution we can make right now? After days of reflection, they landed on it. One sentence that sharpened their purpose like a blade. And once it was clear, everything else fell into place. Because that's the hidden truth about clarity. Clarity isn't restrictive, it's liberating. When you know what you're about, decisions become easier. You stop debating every small move. You stop chasing shiny distractions. You begin to trust your path. It's like that compass. You don't need to know every step of the way. You just need to know the direction and take the next right step. Your essential intent becomes a decision-making filter. Will this project move us toward our core purpose? If yes, let's commit. If not, even if it looks appealing on the surface, it's a no. Here, what a great essential intent looks like. It's inspirational. It energizes you and others. It's measurable. It has a clear outcome. It's strategic. It eliminates non-essential directions. Here, what it's not. A generic mission statement. A list of fuzzy hopes. A compromise to keep everyone happy. Let's take a personal example. Suppose your life has become scattered. You're saying yes to too many roles, too many requests, too many draining obligations. Your essential intent might be, eliminate 80% of non-essential commitments in the next 3 months to fully focus on launching my wellness coaching practice. Boom. Specific, measurable, purposeful. Now every incoming request, every coffee chat, every part-time opportunity, every tempting side project gets filtered through that lens. Does it move you toward your essential intent? If not, it's a clear no. McKeown's point here is deceptively simple. Make one decision today that frees you from 1,000 decisions tomorrow. This chapter isn't about working harder. It's about getting ruthless with your direction. It's not about cutting things for the sake of it. It's about aligning every action with something that deeply matters. Here are some takeaways to bring this to life. Write your own essential intent. One sentence. Make it bold. Make it honest. Share it with someone you trust and ask them to hold you to it. Use it to say no gracefully, confidently, without apology. Let it evolve as you evolve, but don't dilute it to please others. Because when you live without clarity, your energy gets hijacked. But when you define what's essential, your life becomes a reflection of purpose, not pressure. So take the time. Don't rush it. Ask yourself, what is the most important contribution I can make right now? Write it down. Read it every morning. Let it guide you like a compass through the chaos. Because clarity doesn't just simplify life. It sharpens it into something that finally feels like yours. Chapter 11. Dare the power of a graceful no, let's face it. Saying no is hard. It doesn't matter how old we are, how confident we seem, or how successful we've become, something about that T and Y, two-letter word, ties us up in knots. Why? Because saying no risks something primal: rejection, disappointment, disconnection. We don't want to be rude. We don't want to let people down. And deep down, many of us carry the weighty belief that our worth is measured by our usefulness, our ability to always show up, always be available, always say yes. But here's the question Greg McKeown invites us to ask in Chapter 11. What if saying no isn't selfish, but sacred? What if it's not a rejection of others, but a protection of what matters most? What if every graceful no is actually a powerful yes to focus, to energy, to integrity? This chapter is one of the most transformational in the book because it hits us where we live, the intersection between relationships and boundaries. McKeown doesn't pretend it's easy. He acknowledges the discomfort, the awkwardness, the guilt. But he reminds us, firmly, gently, that essentialists dare to say no because they understand a profound truth. Saying yes to everything means saying no to what matters. Let's dig into that. Every time you say yes to something you don't truly want to do, a meeting, a commitment, a project, you are saying no to something else. Your rest, your family, your creative time, your sanity. And over time, all those tiny yeses begin to add up, not into a life of purpose, but a life of obligation. McKeown tells the story of a young professional whose calendar was being consumed by requests from her coworkers. She was constantly being pulled into meetings, helping others with their work, staying late to pick up slack. She wasn't trying to be a martyr, she was just trying to be nice. But her own work, it was suffering. Her energy drained, her resentment growing. Then she had a breakthrough. She realized she could say no, not harshly, not coldly, but gracefully, clearly, confidently. She began to respond with, "I'd love to help, but I'm currently focused on Project X, which is my top priority right now. Maybe someone else can support you on this." It was simple, respectful, and firm. Something amazing happened. People respected her more. She wasn't less liked, she was more trusted. Why? Because she had integrity. She wasn't just reactive. She was intentional. And that gave her a kind of quiet power. McKeown lays out a few powerful strategies for saying no without burning bridges. 1, the no, but technique: say no, but offer an alternative. No, I can't take that on this week, but have you tried asking Sarah? She might be able to help. 2, the let me check my calendar. Pause, this gives you space to avoid impulsive yeses. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. Then respond intentionally. 3, the I'm flattered, but that I can't show appreciation, but stand firm. I'm so honored you thought of me, but I need to pass on this right now. 4. The essential intent shield. Protect your top priority by numbing it. I'm fully focused on launching the new client campaign right now. I won't be able to take on anything else this week. And perhaps most powerfully, 5. The direct, graceful no justification, just clarity. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm going to pass. That's it. No backflips, no excuses, just honest communication. Because here's the deeper truth McKeown reveals. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. You are the only one who can decide how your time, your energy, your heart will be spent. And no one else will do it for you. Of course, you can still be generous, still be kind, still support people you love, but your generosity will come from a place of strength, not guilt, from intention, not obligation. McKeown reminds us, a clear no can be more loving than a dishonest yes. It's not about pushing people away. It's about showing up fully for the right things, at the right time, with the right energy. And that means we have to say no gracefully, unapologetically, when something isn't aligned. Let's close with this idea. Every no creates space. Space for rest. Space for focus. Space for your essential yes. So next time someone asks you for your time, your help, your energy, pause. Take a breath. And remember, you are not obligated to prove your worth through exhaustion. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to disappoint someone. You are allowed to protect your boundaries. Because in doing so, you are saying yes to something far more sacred, your essential life. Chapter 12. UNCOMMIT, winning by cutting your losses. Picture this. You're at the movies. Halfway through, you realize the film is terrible, poor acting, no plot, just endless scenes of confusion. But instead of walking out, you stay seated. You've already paid for the ticket, after all. You've already invested time. Maybe it'll get better. Maybe the ending will redeem it, but it doesn't. And now you've wasted 2 hours, not just one. Sound familiar? This is what economists call the sunk cost fallacy, our tendency to continue investing in something, not because it's worthwhile, but because we're unwilling to let go of what we've already put in. But essentialists, they live by a different rule. Past costs are irrelevant. Only future value matters. In Chapter 12, McKeown teaches us how to uncommit, how to gracefully, wisely, and courageously walk away from things that no longer serve us, no matter how much time, money, or pride we've already invested. And this isn't just about movies. It's about jobs, projects, friendships, obligations, plans that no longer make sense, relationships we're clinging to out of guilt, goals that are no longer aligned with who we've become. Let's pause for a moment here and breathe that in. Because this chapter is not just about decisions, it's about identity. It's about the stories we tell ourselves. I can't quit now. I've put too much into this. People will think I failed. I made a promise I have to finish. But here's the deeper truth McKeown invites us to consider. You don't have to keep going just because you started. Let's repeat that. You don't have to keep going just because you started. This isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's the wisdom to recognize when a path is no longer taking you where you want to go. It's the courage to choose alignment over attachment. McKeown shares the story of a man who had been attending law school for 2 years, but hated it. He wasn't passionate about the work. He dreaded his classes, but he kept pushing forward because, as he put it, "I've already come this far." It wasn't until someone asked him, "Would you choose to start law school today, knowing everything you know now?" that he finally had his moment of clarity. His answer was no. So why keep going? He withdrew. And what happened next was telling. He didn't feel regret, he felt relief. He felt freedom. And that space opened up the courage to pursue a path he actually loved. Now, let's not pretend this is easy. Quitting can feel like failure. Changing direction can feel like betrayal. Letting go of something you once fought for can feel like weakness. But the essentialist knows, holding on out of pride, fear, or inertia is the real trap. So how do we uncommit with wisdom? McKeown offers a few powerful tools. Evaluate the opportunity cost. Ask, what am I giving up by staying committed to this? Time, energy, money, emotional space. Those are valuable resources. If this project, relationship, or goal is draining more than it's giving, it's time to reassess. Use a zero-based budgeting approach. This is a powerful mental exercise. Pretend you're starting from scratch. If you weren't already committed, would you opt in today? If the answer is no, that's a strong signal to consider letting go. Accept that sunk costs are sunk. The time, money, and effort you've already spent are gone. You can't recover them, but you can avoid wasting more. Don't let the past dictate the future. 4. Create a kill criteria. This is a predefined rule that tells you when to stop. For example, if this product doesn't hit X sales within 3 months, we'll discontinue it. Having this in place beforehand reduces emotion and increases clarity. Recognize emotional traps: fear of judgment, desire to please others, pride in finishing what you started. These are all real, but they're not always rational. Step back. Ask, is this decision serving my highest purpose? And maybe most importantly, give yourself permission to evolve. Just because something made sense at one point doesn't mean it still does. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to let go. Because here's the liberating truth. You are not obligated to be the same person you were when you made the decision. You are wiser now. You see more clearly. You know yourself better. And essentialism isn't about proving your consistency. It's about honoring your evolution. So here's your invitation. Take inventory. Look at the things you've committed to: your projects, your roles, your obligations. Ask yourself, would I choose this again today? Does this align with who I am now? Is this moving me toward my essential intent? And if the answer is no, you don't need to fight. You don't need to explain. You just need to uncommit gracefully, thoughtfully, confidently. Letting go isn't failure. Letting go is focus. And focus is where your power lives. Don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.